Shoghi Effendi, from a letter dated 9th of November 1932 to an individual believer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would strongly urge you to utilize to the utmost extent the wealth. Okay, there is a lot of wealth in here. Next reader, please. Anyone who'd care to read.
Ours is the duty to ponder these things in our heart, to strive to widen our vision, and to deepen our comprehension of this cause, and to arise resolutely and unreservedly to play our part, however small, in this greatest drama of the world's spiritual history. Shoghi Effendi, from a letter dated 20th of March 1929 to an individual believer.
Awesome. It seems the show is not over. We are going to play our part in the greatest drama of the world's spiritual history. So the Dawnbreakers Part 2, we are going to be in, potentially. Who knows? Next reader, please.
Shoghi Effendi hopes that you will exert all your efforts to deepen your knowledge of the literature of the movement until you become fully acquainted with its spirit and tenets. Unless you do obtain such a firm hold, you will never be able to teach others and render real service to the promulgation of the faith. Of special importance is the book of the Therein, Some Answered, and Dawnbreakers of Nabíl. Every Baha'i should master these books and be able to explain their contents to others. Besides their importance, they are interesting and most absorbing. From a letter dated 9th of February 1932.
Thank you. Some Answered is obviously Some Answered Questions. I think that's just a typo there. So yes, very important that we deepen, as we know. Next reader, please.
Shoghi Effendi undertook the translation of the Dawnbreakers only after being convinced that its publication will arouse the friends to greater self-sacrifice and a more determined way of teaching. Otherwise, he would not have devoted so much time to it. Reading about the life and activities of those heroic souls is bound to influence our mode of living and of the importance we attach to our services in the cause. Shoghi Effendi therefore hopes that the friends will read, nay rather study that book and encourage their young people to do that as well. From a letter dated 9 May 1932, written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi to an individual believer.
Wow, thank you. And we're going to look at this, why the Guardian decided to translate this book. The time in which he decided to do it, it was insane. Next reader, please.
Books such as the Therein, Some Answered Questions, and the Dawnbreakers should be mastered by every Baha'i. The first two books will reveal the significance of this divine revelation, and as well as the unity of all the prophets of old. The last book will show how the faith was ushered into the world and how its early adherents heroically faced martyrdom and suffering in their desire to establish the cause throughout the world. Knowing the life of those heroes will create in us the urge to follow their footsteps and achieve the same. From a letter dated 9th of June 1922 on behalf of the Guardian.
Superb. So that really there where it says it should be mastered by every Baha'i. And this is partly when I was looking around my community and people I know, when I was like, who do I know that's mastered it? And I kind of went around and I was like, yeah, I don't really know anyone that's mastered it. And I was like, why haven't we done this? Like, why have we been asleep on one of the greatest gifts, arguably the greatest gift that the Guardian has given to us in the West? The Dawnbreakers was translated by the Guardian in 1932. And interestingly enough, the first language it was put into was English. It wasn't in Farsi or Arabic and then translated into English. The Dawnbreakers as a book was taken from Nabíl's collation of his writings and put into English. And the Guardian said it was a gift for the Baha'is of the West. So most of us here hopefully are English speakers, otherwise we're very confused right now. But it's a gift. So you can just sort of take this book and you can write your name at the beginning of the book to whatever your name is from the Guardian. It's awesome. Next reader, please.
Books such as the Therein, Some Answered Questions, the Tablets of Baha'u'llah, Nabíl's narrative, and Dr. Esselman's book should be read and read over again by every soul who desires to serve the movement or considers himself an active member of the group. from a letter dated 9th November 1932, written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi to an individual believer.
Awesome. Okay, so read and read over again. This is probably the 8th time I'm reading it. And I'm still missing loads of things. There's so many deep things in there. Next reader, please.
Dave, we can't hear you anymore.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
hear you too.
I think most people can hear me, Nadine.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, next reader, please.
Shoghi Effendi found great pleasure and spiritual upliftment while working on the translation of Nabíl's narrative. The life of those who figure in it is so stirring that everyone who reads those accounts is bound to be affected and impelled to follow their footsteps of sacrifice in the path of the faith. The Guardian believes, therefore, that it should be studied by the friends, especially the youth, who need some inspiration to carry them through these troubled days. Letter 11th of March 1933.
Wow. So there we are. It should be studied by the friends, especially the youth, and youth from what I understand is anyone under the age of 64. I think someone's drawing on the screen, by the way. Maybe they're unaware that they're doing this, but we're getting marks appear on the screen, which is maybe it's a mystical power. Who knows what's going on? And then finally, with the next reader, read.
It's awesome, absolutely awesome. A very cool book. Hakim from Istanbul Grill.
That's right. That's right. I was in Istanbul Grill, a very good kebab shop in Reading, and this isn't an advert for them. And the kebab shop owner saw me holding this book, and that's what he had to say without even reading it. Such is the transforming power of this book. Superb, guys. All right. So there's some of the reasons why we need them. If anyone wants any of these quotes, if you want to ruminate upon them, you can. But again, this is core reading for Baha'is. From what I'm understanding here, it really is. It's kind of a core reading, and it's kind of important. I'm going to tell you a little story, if I may, guys. If you could just humor me while I tell you this really cute story about my friends Lily and Masjoon. Not to be confused with the Layli and Masjoon, obviously, that's a very different thing. So Lily and Masjoon. So there's this little story I want to tell you about. There was this guy called Little Lee, and this is my friend Little Lee here, and there was this unknown girl who was just chasing after him. It was really weird. She just kept chasing after him, and he was a little bit scared. He was worried that maybe she liked him too much, but he knew as a Baha'i that chastity is good. So being chaste is an important thing, and Little Lee had this in his mind. Little Lee grows up a little bit later, and he goes on this site called Tinder. And and it's a dating app for those of you who may not know, and where people want to meet each other to build a fortress of well-being or something similar to that. And so he puts his Tinder profile up, and he says, "Hi, I'm Lee, looking for a real cutie." So apparently he's looking for a cutie, ideally someone who wears glasses, preferably likes New York. A bit of a strange thing, but there we are. Let me just mute that person. Okay, sorry, Faraz on air? I think if you can mute your mic, that'd be great, please. Thank you. So then it goes on. We then see another girl, and we see her name is Maz. And she says, "Hi, I'm Maz. I love little men, especially Bruno Mars," which is a little bit strange. No, don't understand this. We go on, and then we find out that there's a Bruno Mars concert. And Little Lee, who likes this girl, decides to invite her to this Bruno Mars concert, which is very strange. And they end up going to Fars Fest, which was really good. They go to Fars Fest together, and they have a really cool time. Little Lee, unfortunately, he did like a drink. You know, he had a slight problem, and he was given a bottle of Shiraz wine. And he takes this bottle of Shiraz, and he decides to drink most of the contents. Unfortunately, he got drunk, and he loses his date. He loses her. 2 days later, he's still searching. He's going through the forest trying to look for her. Lo and behold, he comes across the glasses. He remembered Maz had glasses, and here are Maz's glasses. And he's like, "Oh my God, I've almost found Maz." He then goes, he sees her feet, he starts scrolling up. Could this be Little Lee's cutie Maz? As he's coming up to his feet, he goes to see it. Could it be her? Yes, it was. It was cutie, his cutie Maz. Absolutely amazing story, right? So poor Little Lee goes through all this trouble. Eventually, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be very happy to know that they got married. What an amazing thing, right? Little Lee found his cutie, but she was a sick cutie. Unfortunately, she, as you can see from this picture there, she was very cold and needed a drink and needed to get well. So why do we care about the sick cutie? Why is Dave Kayani sitting here and telling you a completely bizarre story about Little Lee and making you all think that this is nothing to do with the Dawnbreakers? Well, it is very much to do with the Dawnbreakers. So this sick cutie that we have, or should I say sick cutie without the C, because if you're kind of street and gangster, you won't have the C, and some people today are. So we've got this sick cutie, S-I-K-Q-T. What is special about this?
You can ask too much of the opponent. It's just a mishit pass.
It is a mishit pass to whoever's listened to the football. Thank you very much. If you can mute your camera, your mic. Thank you, Victor, who's doing the Dawnbreakers and watching football. So if we see with our sick cutie, if we look at our map here, our map of Iran, where predominantly this whole drama takes place, we suddenly see that there is a link with the sick cutie. As we zoom in, we will see we have Shiraz here, we have Isfahan, we have Kashan, Qom, Tehran, and Nur. So we go in a bit more. This is where we see our sick cutie, if you can remember this, really works out. Starting at the bottom of Iran, almost, the spine of Iran, we have the town Shiraz, okay, for this S over here. We then going up, the next major town is Isfahan. The next major town above that is Kashan. Above that, we've got Qom, and you've got to pronounce that right if you're Iranian. It's not a G, it's a Q song, apparently it's just Qom. Above that, we then have Tehran, and then we have a place called Nur, which is not one of the major towns, but of course, Nur we know that Baha'u'llah was from. So it's interesting to see that along this spine of Iran, just for our geography's sake, if we remember the acronym SICQD, it can take us up to the top. So again, Shiraz, Isfahan, Kashan, Qom, Tehran, and Nur. My apologies to those who already know this, but it's always good to go over things and get it. But hang on, I hear you say, who was the girl in the run? At the beginning, remember there was this girl that was running after him. Who was that? Ladies and gentlemen, it may come as a surprise. It was indeed Maz in the run. Yes, that's right. It was Maz in the run. Then if we look at the question, what province is Nur in? Nur is in Mazindaran. Slightly tenuous link. I know I've kind of clutched at straws here, but Nur is indeed in Mazindaran. Mazindaran province, a province which quite often we will refer to Mazindaran. When there's a march towards Mazindaran by Mullah Hussein, the Battle of Fort Sheikh Tabasi, one of the three major battles, happens in none other than Mazindaran. Then we look at Bruno Fars. What was the interesting thing about the Bruno Fars concert? Was it me just being random? No. Shiraz is in the province of Fars. So Fars will come up as well. We're not going to do this for all of them, ladies and gentlemen. You'll be happy to know that that little story is over. But the idea is that we try and learn a little bit. You'll see Mazindaran's up here. You'll see Fars is there. Then Isfahan, Qom, Tehran. To learn a little bit about the history and the geography of those things. So anyway, that was one thing I wanted to look at. The next thing we're going to look at very quickly, and we will get into the book, is the constructions of names and why are names. How do the names come about? What's the deal behind the names? And again, to study the Dawnbreakers, it's imperative to kind of understand the names and really get to grips with them. So since when did the Persians have surnames? I believe it was just in 1920. After post-1920, the Iranians decided that actually having surnames would be a good thing. Before that, they would basically say, for example, you're in Tehran and your name's Tony, you'd be called Tony. But then if there were two Tonys, you'd be known as Big Tony, Small Tony. Or if you were Aggressive Tony, maybe Aggressive Tony. So you'd start doing this, but it would get a bit ridiculous and cumbersome. The other way you would do this is by giving them designations based on their standing in society. So we have these following terms. We have Mullah, we have Shah, we have Sheikh, we have Sayyid, Mirza, Haji. We've got Mirza again, just for good measure. We have Khan, and then we have IXXXXI. There's a reason there's two Mirzas, because Mirza can actually have a couple of different meanings. So what does Mullah mean? Mullah is an Islamic priest. that's pretty much what mullah means. So you study, you become a mullah, that's what it means. So if my name was Dave, which it is, and then I decided to study, I would be, sure enough, Mullah Dave. That would be my new name. If you were a king, obviously you're the Shah. A sheikh is a term, literally a man of old age, and it's used in the sense of all men in Quranic Arabic, but later on it meant like a leader or a noble. So we know we have Sheikh Ahmed. Our story here starts off with the venerable Sheikh Ahmed, who was the head of the Shaykhi school. He was a Shi'i Muslim, but he was obviously spreading this particular strain that he had seen deeply, which we'll get into in the Dawnbreakers, and he was a sheikh, hence his name Sheikh Ahmed. We have Sayyid. Sayyid literally means someone who's a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We also have Mirza. Mirza is an interesting one. It's a title of honor, coming from the words Amir, which means king, and Zadeh, which means born from. So literally meaning prince. If you're born from a king, you're a prince. But if you want to see Amir Zadeh, the way they've done it is they've taken the Mirza, the middle section, as you can see the section in red over here, and they've taken the ah and the de away just to give you Mirza. This is where Mirza comes from. Just in the same way as you have the Baha'i faith. And what's quite miraculous is if you have the Baha'i faith together, if you look at the middle section here, you will see none other than Haifa. We've got Haifa here. So a very similar thing. So again, a Mirza is someone who, it literally means that they're a priest. But later on, the meaning they're a prince, sorry. Later on, the meaning divulged and it changed a little bit, it evolved, and it became that you're a person who's educated, a person of note. The other meaning of Mirza can mean that you're related to the Prophet, peace be upon him, but we'll put that to the side for now. Haji quite simply means you are someone who's been on pilgrimage. So my name's Dave. If I've been on pilgrimage, I get to become Haji Dave, right? So you see how these little titles are used. And what's great, when you have a full name, you can then take out some information from them and kind of realize, wait, I can learn about what this guy is if you have a certain name. Khan is just a polite form of Mr. and usually goes at the end of the name. So Johnny Khan or whatever it is. Peter Khan, as you may well have heard of him. And then finally, we have this thing that's used quite a lot. So you'll have an I dash and then some letters and then another I. The first I is pronounced eh, and the second I is pronounced E. So it's eh and E. Eh is maybe something of a surprise. You're like, whoa, you're here. And then E, it's just you. And this basically denotes where someone is from or something they're recognized for, perhaps their job. So, for example, a hat maker is known as a kola-saz in Farsi. So you'd be kola-sazi. If we have Tony, our magical guy Tony, and our Tony is from Tehran, and you have a Tony from Esfahan, they might have the names Tony Tehrani, Tony Esfahani. So some of you may know people whose last name end in Khorasani. Khorasan is a province, or Shirazi, or blah, blah, blah. So the E, again, usually denotes the town where you're from or a quality about you. We know there are some Rohanis, which are people who are spiritual and the rest of it. So again, you don't need to understand this 1,000,000%, but it's good to have some knowledge. And again, this document is something I can send out for people who give their emails. We can get this across to you. So looking at it again, we've got Haji, you've been on pilgrimage. Sayyid, someone who's a descendant of Prophet Muhammad. Mirza, a title of honor. So in this sense would be someone who's literate. Say if you've been to school, you can read and write, you might get the Mirza title. You have the I, the E, the Sheikh and the Mullah. Usually the order of names in which these things are done is, and I say usually because there's a couple of exceptions, but if you've been on pilgrimage, that's the first thing. Now for women, Hajjah would be Hajjiyah, but for the sake of the Dawnbreakers, because we don't encounter that really, we'll just stick with the male forms, if that's okay. So we have Haji, which is someone who's been on pilgrimage. So if you, and it's interesting for yourselves to work out your own Dawnbreaker names, and I think this really gives it, so whatever your name is, if you've been on pilgrimage, your Persian name, pre-1920s, you would have Haji in front of your name. So if you're a Sandra, you would be Haji Sandra. Now secondly, you are a person of note, so if you're someone who's educated, you could get the title Mirza, or if you're a descendant of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, you would get the title Sayyid. So you can choose. Some people are both, and they can choose one or the other depending on their circles, or not. So let's assume I'm an educated person. I would be Haji Mirza Dave, okay? Because the third one is where you put your third name in. The fourth one is where you're from or an attribute about you. So if Tony, let's say Tony is someone who's been on pilgrimage, we'll have, and we also know that he's a descendant of Prophet Muhammad. He would end up being Haji, Sayed, Tony, and Tony's from London. Londoni. That's how the name would come about. So for myself, for example, yes, I've been on pilgrimage. I actually am a Sayed, believe it. So I will choose Sayed for this case. So I would be Haji Sayed Dave Hansami. Because remember, it can be an attribute about you. So maybe if you're extremely handsome, you might get Hansami. I don't know why you're laughing. Yeah, just saying how it is. So there we are. So looking at this person here, who's actually my great-great-granddad. Can someone tell me what we know about this character? We've got Haji Mirza Jani Kashani.
Well, he's been on pilgrimage.
He has?
He's a person of note.
He is a person of note. He's an educated person, correct?
Educated person, yeah.
Say again?
His name is Johnny.
His name is Johnny, that's right.
And he's from Kashan.
And he's from Kashan. There we are. Awesome. Well done, guys. Nice. So now we're really looking at this and we're breaking down the code. And that's what part of it is. Once you are able to do this quite fluidly, it's brilliant. Because when you start reading Haji Mirza Jani Kashani, you're like, wait, I know something about this guy. Now, what makes things more confusing in the Dawnbreakers, what the Guardian does is he writes and he may start saying, Haji Mirza Jani Kashani went blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, he's saying Mirza Jani, and when you're reading it, you're like, wait, who's Haji Mirza Jani Kashani? Who's Mirza Jani? Or then he might just say Jani Kashani. So it's almost like you're like, there's 4 different characters here, and you're like, I don't get it. It's going crazy. I don't know what's going on. But actually, you realize, no, they're all the same name. Usually, the full form will be used first. So we will have Haji Mirza Jani Kashani went to the shop. Mirza Jani came back. Johnny Kashani went fishing. And then Johnny did blah, 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 blah. You usually don't get down to the Johnny out of respect. But anyway. So that's a little bit about the constructions of names. Thank you so much for again, humoring me with that. Again, if anyone wants these slides, we can have them sent out. Now is going to be the time where we're going to actually go into the Dawnbreakers, the greatest story ever told, in my opinion. It's absolutely beautiful. Like I said, the Guardian translated this in 1932 as a gift for us. Some of us may be familiar with a man called E.G. Brown, Edward Granville Brown, someone who met Baha'u'llah, in fact, and I believe it was E.G. Brown who was, even though he met Baha'u'llah, he was very much in love with the Bab, absolutely in love with the Bab. E.G. Brown was, and he felt a little bit upset with the Baha'is as time went on, because we would talk about Baha'u'llah so much and Abdul Baha and all the rest of it. It seems like we were playing down the greatness of the Bab, which is absolutely not the case. I don't need to explain that to you guys, but how important the Bab is to us. And he was very much distant. He became very distant from the faith, did E.G. Brown. And he was never a Baha'i, but he was close to it at one point. And it was only upon receiving this book, The Dawnbreakers, Nabíl's narrative, did he suddenly actually get the respect and the love that we have for the Bab and the position that the Bab plays in our faith. And it's interesting, in God Passes By, you'll see the Guardian, God Passes By, which was written in 1944, which is basically goes across the first 100 years of what Shoghi Effendi calls the Baha'i era. And it's interesting that he calls it the Baha'i era. That's not from 53 when Baha'u'llah got his revelation, or from 63 when he declared his mission. It's from when the Bab came. So that is, it's very much, the Babi faith is very much part of this Baha'i faith in a sense. It's part of the Baha'i era. Anyway, guys, it's very strange just talking at you, so I hope I'm not boring you at all. But what we're going to do now, we're going to have less of Dave's voice. The entire book, The Dawnbreakers, it starts off, there's an introduction. And the introduction lasts like 115 pages. It's quite a meaty introduction. So I would ask you guys, if you so wish, by all means, that's something that maybe you can look at yourself, the introduction. I'm going to give you a super brief intro to the intro, because I think that's something that people can read by themselves a lot easier. But touching on some of the themes that the Guardian goes through, he talks about the Qajar sovereigns, so the royal family, basically, who are known as the Qajaris. He talks about the government. He talks about the people, the ecclesiastical order. So first, he's basically talking about how Iran, which is a country that we absolutely adore, such a beautiful country and such a rich country that we can't wait to help contribute as much as we can to, at the time, as with every country, so not to single Iran out, there was a lot of corruption amongst the different classes. So amongst the monarchy, there was corruption. The government, there was corruption. The religious powers that be, there was corruption. As I say, Iran's not singled out. Any country across the world, you get this. So he goes in to set the background of actually what was happening and the time that this whole thing is born into. And then he has a tribute to the Bab, Baha'u'llah's tribute to the Bab, which perhaps we will touch upon. Then we go on to learn about the distinguishing features of Shia Islam. And Shia Islam is very important, and perhaps I'll do a separate class or a separate video of that because it's really important from my perspective. There's so many things in here. We have to understand that the Bab came at a time and to a country that was Shia Islam, basically. The whole of Iran was pretty much Shia Islam. We know that the two kind of branches of Islam, the two main branches, you have the Sunnis and you have the Shiites. The Sunnis are about 90% of the world. The Shiites or the Shiis are about 10%. So the Bab comes into a land which is very heavy in Shia doctrine. So a lot of his writings, a lot of the things that he taught when he gives certain explanations, he does this with the Shia background in mind. The Bab, 95% of his work is in Arabic. You know, it's amazing what he does with certain things, how he takes things and remixes them, and it's all Shia talk and Shia language. So it'd be good for us to understand, if people so want, and I don't know what the general consensus is, to maybe go into a little bit about that. But we're not going to do that this session. That's something that maybe we'll touch on later. For now, we will go into the actual book itself. At this moment, sorry, before I continue, are there any comments or questions that anybody would like to make? Now is the time to do so, if there's anything you so wish to share. This either means I've explained things perfectly or everybody's asleep. Not entirely sure. If you are asleep, I hope you're having a nice sleep. Okay, so there's no comments or questions that anyone...
Dave?
Yes.
Sorry, I was just wondering if your abstracts, you know, like all the points that you have prepared, like, can they be shared or
anything can be shared? Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, yes, by all means. And if I'm wrong with anything, which is possible, it's a possibility. If I am wrong with anything, please keep it to yourselves and don't tell anyone, because I'll lose face.
No, actually, sorry, that takes me to another question. You earlier mentioned that there are some facts in the book that are actually not true, or like they haven't happened. Do we know which ones are those, so that we know why they have been put there?
Predominantly everything is true. I think this thing I brought up about Vahid and the Surah Kosar, the Divine Plenitude, that's one of the big things that stands out. But there are some other things that are slightly inaccurate. But the inaccuracies they're not massive, to be honest. They don't, you know, another thing, for example, is when His Holiness the Bab was martyred, we're told that there were 750 musketeers. And I hear sometimes people say, oh, how could there be so many people in this room? And it's a good question. Were there 750? There are other texts from Iran, so completely non-biased, who turn around and say, no, the 750 was nonsense. There was not 750. There were 1,250. So there was even more people, apparently. Another text says, no, there was 1,000. So it could be argued, was there 750? Was there not? Again, these, to be honest, any more than one is pretty bad. So there are certain things like that, but nothing that really changes the narrative so strongly.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
Dave, I had a question. One is that I sent you my private email address for those slides, but I don't know if you will catch that, because there are like 81 people texting in this group. So I don't know, is it okay?
It is okay, but what I will do right now, perhaps, I will share my email address with everybody. And
I think that would be best, yes.
And perhaps if you email it, my email address is my name @gmail.com. My name being Dave Kayani. That's who you're talking to right now at Gmail.
Hansami?
Say again?
Dave Kayani Hamsay, yeah?
Hansami, exactly, yes. That's exactly it. So I've put it in the group. So by all means, email. I would suggest, if you so wish to be part of this weekly deepening that we're going to have, send me your mobile numbers. I'm going to create a WhatsApp group and the rest of it so that we can send things.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Okay. I had one more question. I've heard, I don't know if it's correct, but I've heard from some friends at the World Center that the Dawnbreakers, as we have it right now, is because there's the Arabic one or the Persian one, right? And that's far bigger than the one we have now, right? I mean, it's a translation of the Guardian.
Correct. So yeah. What you mean when we say that, the notes that Nabíl wrote?
Yes.
There's a lot more stuff in there. There's
exactly. So this is not a complete translation of all the notes of Nabíl.
No, but it's a complete. It's what the Guardian thought the most poignant things were, and what the Guardian wanted to share.
Exactly.
So books such as Hassan Modakar Balyuzi's book on the Bab, for example.
Yes.
There's a lot of things in there that have been taken from Nabíl's original narrative, if you will, and from other sources. So there's things there that have been taken. So there is more information. More information will come out. Nabíl in this book himself, he says that the relatives of the people in Nayriz, which was one of the 3 battles, should bring together more history. This is not a complete history at all, but it's certainly the backbone structure. And,
Thank you.
And the Guardian calls this a book of meditation, a book of inspiration. And that's what I think we need to be as people of faith, inspired people, like beaming people, shining to really take on the beauty and try and get to grips with what the faith is here. Okay, awesome. So if it's okay, we're going to look at Baha'u'llah's tributes to the Bab and his chief disciples. And these are from extracts from the Kitab-e-Iqan, which a dear friend and scholar, Dr. Fanon Apazir, is actually doing a study class on the Kitab-e-Iqan. So if you're interested in that, by all means, let me know. And
Dave, just before you start, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, very quickly. I think this would be a great thing for you to do for the youth, especially the youth are not studying these days at school. So they have enough time to give maybe a half hour or 2 to this, and that would be wonderful if you started one for the youth, because I think your attitude and the way you present it is so perfect for the youth.
Your voice, I don't know if that's a polite way of telling me it's terrible for adults, but I'll...
No, not at all. I'm just thinking, I just the way you're doing it, I think it's fabulous. Sorry, I have 4 kids, so I'm thinking of my kids too.
Well, they are welcome to join us, and who knows, we maybe can do more sessions. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thank you. All right, people, unless there's anything else, if I could ask a competent reader to take us on to this tribute by Baha'u'llah to the Bab. And just before we do that, I just want to share this beautiful, there's a letter, I think, from the Bab to Baha'u'llah or vice versa. And it's so beautiful where in the letter it says something along the lines of, this is a letter from God to God. And I just find that really powerful and really amazing. So here we have Baha'u'llah, his tribute to the Bab. I mean, it's just insane. But this is taken from the Kitab-e-Iqan. So would somebody, perhaps yourself actually, would you like to kick us off and start us reading this, please? Thank you.
You mean me?
I do.
Though young and tender of age, and though the cause he revealed was contrary to the desire of all the peoples of the earth, both high and low, rich and poor, exalted and abased, king and subject, yet he arose and steadfastly proclaimed it. All have known and heard this. He feared no one. He was reckless of consequences. Could such a thing be made manifest except through the power of a divine revelation and the potency of God's invincible will? Sorry, I can't read. I can't see the rest. I've got it being covered. Can you continue?
By the righteousness of God, were anyone to attain so...
Oh, it's not moving. Greater revelation in his heart. The thought of such a declaration would alone confound him. Were the hearts of all men to be crowded into his heart, he would still hesitate to venture upon so awful an enterprise. He could achieve it only by the permission of God, only if the channel of his heart were to be linked with a source of divine grace, and his soul be assured of the unfailing sustenance of the Almighty. To what, we wonder, do they ascribe so great a daring? Do they accuse him of madness as they accused the prophets of old? Or do they maintain that his motive was none other than leadership and the acquisition of earthly riches?
New reader, please. Thank you very much. Beautifully read.
Gracious God, in his book, which he have entitled Qayamul Asma, the first, the greatest, and mightiest of all books, he prophesied his own martyrdom. In it this passage, O thou remnant of God, I have sacrificed myself wholly for thee. I have accepted curses for thy sake, and have yearned for naught but martyrdom in the path of thy love. Sufficient witness unto me is God, the exalted, the protector, the ancient of days. Could the revealer of such utterance be regarded as walking in any other way than the way of God, and as having yearned for aught else except his good pleasure? In this very verse there lieth concealed a breath of detachment for which, if it were breathed upon the world, all beings would renounce their life and sacrifice their soul.
Thank you. Keep going. Yeah.
And now consider how this Sadri of the Rizwan of God have, in the prime of youth, risen to proclaim the cause of God. Behold, what steadfastness he, the beauty of God, have revealed. The whole world rose to hinder him, yet it utterly failed. The more severe the persecution they inflicted on that Sadri of blessedness, the more his fervor increased, and the brighter burned the flame of his love. All this is evident, and none disputeth its truth. Finally, he surrendered his soul, and winged his flight unto the realms above.
Thank you. Next reader, please.
No sooner,
Go ahead.
no sooner had that eternal beauty revealed himself in Shiraz in the year 60 and rent asunder the veil of concealment than the signs of the ascendancy, the might, the sovereignty and power emanating from that essence of essences and sea of seas were manifest in every land. So much so that from every city there appeared the signs, the evidences, the tokens, and the testimonies of that divine luminary. How many were those pure and kindly hearts which faithfully reflected the light of that eternal sun? And how manifold the emanations of knowledge from that ocean of divine wisdom which encompassed all beings in every city, which encompassed all beings. In every city, all the divines and nobles rose to hinder and repress them, and girded up the loins of malice, of envy, and tyranny for their suppression. How great the number, those holy souls, those essences of justice, who accused of tyranny were put to death, and how many embodiments of purity, who showed forth naught but true knowledge and stainless deeds, suffered an agonizing death. Notwithstanding all this, each of these holy beings, up to his last moment, breathed the name of God and soared in the realm of submission and resignation. Such was the potency and transmuting influence which he exercised over them, that they ceased to cherish any desire but his will, and wedded their souls to his remembrance. Reflect, who in the world is able to manifest such transcendent power, such pervading influence? All these stainless hearts, and sanctified souls have, with absolute resignation, responded to the summons of his decree. Instead of making complaint, they rendered thanks unto God, and amidst the darkness of their anguish, they revealed naught but radiant acquiescence in his will. It is well known how relentless was the hate and how bitter the malice and enmity entertained by all the peoples of the earth toward these companions. The persecution and pain which they inflicted on these holy and spiritual beings were regarded by them as means unto salvation, prosperity, and everlasting success. Hath the world, since the days of Adam, witnessed such tumult, such violent commotion? Notwithstanding all the torture they suffered and the manifold afflictions they endured, they became the object of universal opprobrium and execration. Methinks patience was revealed only by virtue of their fortitude, and faithfulness itself was begotten by their deeds. Do thou ponder these momentous happenings in thine heart, so that thou mayest apprehend the greatness of this revelation, and perceive its stupendous glory.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all who read. So this is what Baha'u'llah is saying about the Bab. We'll note there that it talks about, has there been in history, in the annals of history, so much pain and such torture for anybody as there was from the Bab, who at the age of 25 comes into a land and completely disrupts the order of everything, only to do so to spread love and to spread patience and bring about unity and the equality and all the rest of it. Some people accuse the Bab of being hungry for power. But as we all know, this certainly wasn't the case, and Baha'u'llah the same, who came from a source of wealth and the rest of it, and could have climbed up the ranks of the court of the Shah, but had no interest in doing so. Thank you very much. We have this introductory note, which is basically Nabíl thanking, laying it down, which we will read, and you'll see his here you'll see his name, Muhammad Zarandi. Of course, this is Mullah Muhammad Zarandi, who is Nabíl. His name Mullah Muhammad, and he's, of course, if anyone can guess where he's from, yes, he is indeed from Zarand. You can tell that by his name. The introductory note, would somebody please care to read for us? Also, sorry, just before I do this, I shouldn't take this for granted. It makes references quite often, as it did before, to the year 60. I think most of us may well know this, but the year 60 is obviously referring to the Islamic calendar, which is the year 1260. And this is obviously in Islam they use this calendar AH, which is after Hijrah, which is from when Muhammad moved between Medina and Mecca. So that's what this is starting. That's where the calendar starts from. So from the year 60. So any reference to 60, you'll know that's where it is. It's the year 1260. 1305 obviously is the year 1305. So would somebody please care to kick us off with this?
It is my intention, by the aid and assistance of God, to devote the introductory pages of this narrative to such accounts as I have been able to obtain regarding those twin great lights, Sheikh Ahmed Asai and Sayyid Kazem Rashti, after which it is my hope to recount, in their chronological order, the chief events that have happened since the year 60, the year that witnessed the declaration of the faith by the Bab, until the present time, the year 1305 AH. In certain instances, I shall go into some detail. In others, I shall content myself with a brief summary of events. I shall place on record a description of the episodes I myself have witnessed, as well as those that have been reported to me by trustworthy and recognized informants, specifying in every case their names and standing. Those to whom I am primarily in debt are the following: Mirza Ahmad Ghazvini, the Bab's amanuensis; Sayyid Ismail Zabi, Sheikh Hassan Zunuzi, Sheikh Abu Turab Ghazvini, and last but not least, Mirza Musa, Aghay Kalim, brother of Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, super. Thank you very much. Please continue, Sina.
I render thanks to God for having assisted me in the writing of these preliminary pages, and for having blessed and honored them with the approval of Baha'u'llah, who has graciously deigned to consider them, and who signified through his amanuensis Mirza Rajan, who read them to him, his pleasure and acceptance. I pray that the Almighty may sustain and guide me, lest I err and falter in the task I have set myself to accomplish. Muhammad Zarandi, Akka, Palestine, 1305 AH.
Superb. Thank you very much, Sina. Thank you very much for that. You will see that my footnotes are not working. There we are. Yeah. So 1305 again is this 1887 to 1888, as we said. So this is someone, Nabíl, someone who I'm absolutely in love with, to be honest. Mullah Muhammad Zarandi, who was asked to do this. He was tasked with going and getting this history, going and getting this history of the faith, which he did, and eventually he's in Akka with Baha'u'llah in Palestine, as it was, and. So there he is. Now, interestingly enough, obviously we know the Bab came, and he brought his own revelation. He brought his own faith. He also was the harbinger of someone greater than himself. So he's also coming to talk about Baha'u'llah, and we can talk about the Bab for hours. And this is just such a beautiful book. But what's interesting, the Bab had said, and this is a bit of a side note, but I will share this. There were a couple of different places where the Bab had made mention as to when the promised one will come through. And in the book, the greatest of books, the mightiest of books that the Bab has written, which is the Qayyum al-Asma. This is a commentary on the Surah of Yusuf, the story of Joseph, basically. And in here, earlier on, we read that Baha'u'llah had said that he prophesied his own martyrdom. But also in that book, he'd also prophesied when Baha'u'llah would be revealing himself. There were some people that were a bit confused if it was the year 9, the year 9 being 9 years after 1844. Some people were confused if it'd be the year 19, which would have been 1853, pardon me. So there was this point where the Bab had been executed, unfortunately. And he'd been martyred, sorry. The Bab has been martyred, and there was a lot of people around who were claiming to be Baha'u'llah, essentially, him whom God manifest. A lot of people were claiming to do this. And after a while, people were told, like, maybe it's you, who knows? And Mullah Muhammad Zarandi, a.k.a. Nabíl, eventually decides, yes, it's me. And he shares the message with people, and he says, guys, listen, it is me. I am the one that you're all expecting to come. And he says, because of the actions of Mirza Taqi Khan, the prime minister at the time, and the actions of the Shah, Nasruddin Shah, I promise you within 3 days the Shah will be dead. And this is a promise that this is what will happen. Of course, on the 4th day, as the Shah is alive, Nabíl suddenly realizes the error of his ways. And he then has to very humbly say, guys, sorry, I may have made a mistake. I'm not Baha'u'llah. Can I just want to put it out there? So I had a little, sorry about that. So somebody who was so in love, who erred in his ways, but then retracted it straight away. This is the guy we're dealing with, a guy who we know had actually drowned himself in 1892 when Baha'u'llah died. Such was his love for Baha'u'llah. So this really is a labor of love, and it's very intense. So yeah. So I think with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've had the introduction. We get to talk about the Dawnbreakers. We get to go into it, the mission of Sheikh Ahmed Asai. What do we know about Sheikh Ahmed from what we learnt? Just purely from the names. Is he a mullah?
He's someone of knowledge, and he's from Asa.
He's an old man, yeah, so an old man.
Old man. Elderly man, yeah.
And what, sorry? Somebody said something, but yes, he's indeed from Asa, which is Saudi Arabia. This is his birthplace, where I believe we have friends very close to there right now who are with us. Anyway, right, we're going to go into this, and we're going to look at some of the footnotes. Some of the footnotes are a little bit strange, may seem to a Western audience. And with the footnotes here, there's a lot of footnotes, so I've kind of handpicked some of the footnotes that we'll go into to try and look Footnote 7 seems a little bit strange when you read it at first, but whoever would care to read, if someone would take us on the mission. Are there any comments or questions before we start?
No.
We're all good to go. Okay, so who would like to take us on this journey? And this is where it all begins. We start to learn about Sheikh Ahmed Asai. Please, someone.
The mission of Sheikh Ahmed Asai. At a time when the shining reality of the faith of Muhammad had been obscured by the ignorance, the fanaticism and perversity of the contending sects into which it had fallen, there appeared above the horizon of the East a luminous star of divine guidance, Sheikh Ahmed Asai. He observed how those who professed the faith of Islam had shattered its unity, sapped its force, perverted its purpose, and degraded its holy name. His soul was filled with anguish at the sight of the corruption and strife which characterized the Shia sect of Islam. Inspired by the light that shone within him, he arose with unerring vision, with fixed purpose and sublime detachment to utter his protest against the betrayal of the faith by that ignoble people. Aglow with zeal and conscious of the sublimity of his calling, he vehemently appealed not only to Shia Islam, but to all the followers of Muhammad.
Pause for 1 second. Somebody's not muted their microphone, and we can hear you saying "Ey Khada," which is great, praising God during this. But if that is you, please mute your microphone. Sorry. Thank you. Please continue, Reba.
It's still not cut, I think.
Say again?
It is still not cut, I think. It's very... Yes, good. Okay.
Could it be...
I think you can mute it, Dave. You can mute everyone if you want.
Faridun Khan?
It's good. He cut it. It's good.
He cut it? Okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, please continue.
Though with zeal and conscious of the sublimity of his calling, he vehemently appealed not only to Shia Islam, but to all the followers of Muhammad throughout the East, to waken from the slumber of negligence and to prepare the way for him who must needs be made manifest in the fullness of time, whose light alone could dissipate the mists of prejudice and ignorance which had enveloped that faith. Forsaking his home and kindred, on one of the islands of Bahrain, to the south of the Persian Gulf, he set out, as bidden by an almighty providence, to unravel the mysteries of those verses of Islamic scriptures which foreshadowed the advent of a new manifestation. He was well aware of the dangers and perils that beset his path. He fully realized the crushing responsibility of his task. There burned in his soul the conviction that no reform, however drastic, within the faith of Islam, could achieve the regeneration of this perverse people. He knew and was destined by the will of God to demonstrate that nothing short of a new and independent revelation, as attested and foreshadowed by the sacred scriptures of Islam, could revive the fortunes and restore the purity of that decadent faith.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Beautifully read again. So yeah, here we have this character that we're introducing, Sheikh Ahmed Asai. So he's the first guy who this whole story kind of kicks off. And he was living in an island of Bahrain. And he decides that actually looking around him, that the beautiful faith of Islam, the absolute beautiful faith of Islam, which Baha'is are very much in love with, and he wasn't at the time. Unfortunately, there was some features where people had unfortunately taken things and they tried twisting things, and the shining light of Islam wasn't able to be as bright, unfortunately. So he decides that he's going to go and study. He's going to go and study in one of the a place that's like, I can describe it as the Oxford or Cambridge for people in the UK, or the Harvard of America, of study centers of Islamic text. And really the two places we have are Najaf and Karbala, which are in Iraq. In Iran, there's a place called Qom, and that's the center of study text, the place where you go to study text. So these Islamic universities, essentially. And this is what he decided to go and do, to give a regeneration to what he called this perverse people. And he knew it was going to be difficult. But he was inspired by one thing. And if you've read the Dawnbreakers, maybe you've not picked up on this. What was Sheikh Ahmed Asai inspired by that made him go and do this? And this is something that we know his successor, who was called Sayyid Kazim Rashdi, so Kazim from Rasht, he talks about that in the book that Sheikh Ahmed had written, he reveals this. So here is a footnote that Sayyid Kazim makes reference to his master being Sheikh Ahmed. Could I ask Saba Mazlum, please, to read this? Footnote 7, please.
Sayyid Kazim, in his book entitled Dilul of Mota, I can't really read that, writes as follows: Our master one night saw the Imam Hassan. Upon him may the blessings of God rest. His Holiness put in his mouth his blessed tongue. From the adorable saliva of His Holiness, he drew forth the sciences and assistance of God. The taste was sweeter even than honey, more perfumed than the musk. It was also quite warm. When he came to himself and wakened from his dream, he inwardly radiated the light of divine contemplation. His soul overflowed with the blessings of God and became entirely severed from everything save God.
Thank you very much. That was the bit I wanted to read. So you look at it, it seems very strange, certainly to a Western audience. But the way Sheikh Ahmed Asai knew to go and search and to do all of these things is purely and simply, he has this dream with Imam Hassan. Now, in Shia Islam, we have predominantly in the Twelver sect. So the Twelvers are the one who believe in the 12 Imams. There are also Seveners and the rest of it. And this basically comes down to the successorship. So when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he passed away, the Shia belief is that next who came in power was his son-in-law and cousin, Ali, who's known as Imam Ali. So he was like the guardian of the faith in a sense. After Ali, we have his two sons, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. So I believe it's Imam Hassan that he has this dream about. Sheikh Ahmed has this dream that Imam Hassan comes up to him, holds his head, and decides to put his tongue inside his mouth. And this is where the saliva transfers from his mouth, from Hassan's mouth, into Sheikh Ahmed's mouth. And for me, the attention to detail here is staggering. It's amazing that we know it was sweeter even than honey, more perfume than musk. And then this little detail, it was also quite warm. Just in case you were wondering as to the temperature of the saliva, we now know that it was also quite warm. But this is the thing that basically happened. This kind of dream that basically takes place, and that's what kind of kicks it off. So straight off the bat, Sheikh Ahmed Asai is a very interesting guy, and he's basically going to try and break these things down. And we know that His Holiness the Bab, he I think has his revelation by drinking a couple of drops of blood from the severed head of Imam Hussein. This is Hassan's brother, Imam Ali's son. So there's these things that as a Western audience certainly seems a bit like, oh wow, what's going on here? But there's obviously spiritual, metaphorical symbolism behind it. The rest of it. So thank you very much. Next reader, please.
Bereft of all earthly possessions and detached from all save God, he, in the early days of the 13th century of the Hegira, when 40 years of age, arose to dedicate the remaining days of his life to the task he felt impelled to shoulder. He first proceeded to Najaf and Karbala, where in a few years he acquired familiarity with the prevailing thoughts and standards current among the learned men of Islam. There he came to be recognized as one of the authorized expounders of the Islamic Holy Writ, was declared a mujtahid, and soon obtained an ascendancy over the rest of his colleagues, who either visited or were residing in those holy cities. These came to regard him as one initiated into the mysteries of divine revelation. and qualified to unravel the abstruse utterances of Muhammad and of the Imams of the faith. As his influence increased and the scope of his authority widened, he found himself besieged on every side by an ever-increasing number of devoted inquirers who asked to be enlightened regarding the intricacies of the faith, all of which he ably and fully expounded. By his knowledge and fearlessness, he struck terror to the hearts of the Sufis and Neoplatonists and other kindred schools of thought, who envied his learning and feared his ruthlessness. Thereby he acquired added favor in the eyes of those learned divines, who looked upon these sects as the disseminators of obscure and heretical doctrines. Yet great as was his fame and universal as was the esteem in which he was regarded, he despised all the honors which his admirers lavished upon him. He marveled at their servile devotion to dignity and rank, and refused resolutely to associate himself with the objects of their pursuits and desires. Continue. Having achieved his purpose in those cities, and inhaling the fragrance which wafted upon him from Persia, he felt in his heart an irrepressible yearning to hasten to that country. He concealed from his friends, however, the real motive that impelled him to direct his steps towards that land. By way of the Persian Gulf, he hastened onto the land of his heart's desire, ostensibly for the purpose of visiting the shrine of the Imam Rida in Mashhad. He was filled with eagerness to unburden his soul and search zealously for those to whom he could deliver the secret which to no one he had as yet divulged. Upon his arrival at Shiraz, the city which enshrined that concealed treasure of God, and from which the voice of the herald of a new manifestation was destined to be proclaimed, he repaired to the Masjid-i-Jumi, a mosque which in its style and shape bore a striking resemblance to the holy shrine of Mecca. Many a time did he, whilst gazing upon that edifice, observe, "Verily, this house of God betokens such signs as only those who are endowed with understanding can perceive. Methinks he who conceived and built it was inspired of God." How often and how passionately he extolled that city. Such was the praise he lavished upon it that his hearers, who were only too familiar with its mediocrity, were astonished at the tone of his language. "Wonder not," he said to those who were surprised, "for ere long the secret of my words will be made manifest to you. Among you there shall be a number who will live to behold the glory of a day which the prophets of old have yearned to witness." So great was his authority in the eyes of the ulamas who met and conversed with him that they professed themselves incapable of comprehending the meaning of his mysterious allusions and ascribed their failure to their own deficient understanding.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll just pause there. So firstly, Sheikh Ahmed Asai, he goes and he studies between Najaf and Karbala, which, like I said, are like the Oxford and Cambridge of study centers. He becomes this incredible Islamic scholar. He becomes what's known as a mujtahid. Okay, a mujtahid is, from what I understand, is pretty much one of the top ranks you can have. So you have a mullah, and going above a mullah is a mujtahid, where you can, I think, talk about law and the rest of it and your interpretations. You have a lot of power of doing this. So he becomes this, but he's also, whilst he's become this, he realizes that he's meant to know the answers to everything. He kind of figures, I don't know the answers to everything. Like, yes, I'm a mujtahid. Yes, I've studied so much and I've got all this knowledge, but I don't really know much. So he's become a mujtahid. He then has the opportunity, it says, by the fragrances wafted from Persia, to travel to Persia. So he then goes to Iran. Now, Iraq is to the west of Iran. So he goes from Iraq, and sorry, I should actually let me pull up this map for 1 second, just so that we can see what's happening here. But he decides to go from, there we are. If I pull up this map, then we all know what we're talking about. He decides to go from Karbala and Najaf, where he is. So we have here, if I've zoomed in, we have Najaf over here, we have Karbala over there. And he decides to start heading east into Iran. So he moves from these towns here into Iran. As he walks down and he gets to Shiraz, and remember, there's this thing that's wafted, there's something about him. He sees this mosque, the mosque of the Imam Jomeh, I think. Is that what it was called, I think? So he sees this mosque, and every time we see the word masjid, we know that means mosque. So the masjid, here we have it. The Masjid Jomeh. He sees this mosque, and he just starts going on and on about this mosque, about how incredible this mosque is and how beautiful and like the power that's within it. And a lot of the people around him are like, all right, Sheikh Ahmed, calm down. Yeah, it's a nice mosque, but like, and he's like, you don't get it. It's such a good mosque. And people are like, okay, cool. Like, no more kebab for you. Why are you so excited about this mosque? But he's absolutely flipping out and just talking so passionately about this mosque. And he's like, you don't get this. Like, my words will eventually in the future will come out. You will suddenly see. And then he says, a day which prophets of old have yearned to witness. He's talking about something mad. For ere long, the secrets of my words will be made manifest to you. And then it's like, wow, he's going so crazy about this mosque, but everyone just thinks Sheikh Ahmed is just a little bit, maybe he's a bit tired, he hasn't enough tea, maybe not enough baklava in the morning, his sugar's low, could be diabetic, who knows? But he's talking about this mosque. Of course, this mosque is the mosque that the Bab goes to. This is the Bab's mosque. And there's something about the power of Sheikh Ahmed where he just knows. And I don't know how he knows. I don't know what it is. And maybe this is part of the reason The Guardian puts this in this whole story, because everything in here is there for us to relate to, I kind of feel. For us to take things out of this book. It's not just a cool story about Sheikh Ahmed and about these other people and Qudus and well, I say, you know, yes, it's cool, but there's something that actually I feel that we can tap into this power. We can tap into the source through meditation, through study and the rest of it. I don't know, just Dave's thought. But that's what's going on, basically. That's the happenings of what's going on. He sees this mosque and just kind of flips out a little bit. Again, any comments or questions, jump in straight away. But yeah. Next reader, please. Thank you. And again, beautifully read. Who'd care to read next?
I'll go for it. Having sown the seeds of divine knowledge in the hearts of those whom he found receptive to his call, Sheikh Ahmed set out for Yazd, where he tarried a while, engaging continually in the dissemination of such truths as he felt urged to reveal. Most of his books and epistles were written in that city. Such was the fame he acquired that the ruler of Persia, Fatah Ali Shah, was moved to address to him from Tehran a written message, calling upon him to explain certain specific questions related to the abstruse teachings of the Muslim faith, the meaning of which the leading ulamas of his realm had been unable to unfold. To this he readily answered in the form of an epistle, to which he gave the name of Risaliya Sultaniya. The Shah was so pleased with the tone and subject matter of that epistle that he forthwith sent him a second message, this time extending to him an invitation to visit his court. Replying to this second imperial message, he wrote the following: As I had intended ever since my departure from Najaf and Karbala to visit and pay my homage to the shrine of the Imam Rida in Mashhad, I venture to hope that your Imperial Majesty will graciously allow me to fulfill the vow which I have made. Later on, God willing, it is my hope and purpose to avail myself of the honor which your Imperial Majesty has deigned to confer upon me. Among those who, in the city of Yazd, were awakened by the message of that bearer of the light of God, was Haji Abdul Wahab, a man of great piety, upright and God-fearing. He visited Sheikh Ahmed each day in the company of a certain mullah, Abdul Khalik Yazdi, who was noted for his authority and learning. On certain occasions, however, in order to talk confidentially with Abdul Wahab, Sheikh Ahmed, to the great surprise of the learned Abdul Khalik, would ask him to retire from his presence and leave him alone with his chosen and favored disciple. This marked preference shown to so modest and illiterate a man as Abdul Wahab was a cause of great surprise to his companion, who was only too conscious of his own superiority and attainments. Later, however, when Sheikh Ahmed had departed from Yazd, Abdul Wahab retired from the society of men and came to be regarded as a Sufi. By the orthodox leaders of that community, however, such as the Ni'matullah and Dahabi, he was denounced as an intruder and was suspected of a desire to rob them of their leadership. Abdul Wahab, for whom the Sufi doctrine had no special attraction, scorned their false imputations and shunned their society. He associated with none except Haji Hassan-i-Naini, whom he had chosen as his intimate friend and to whom he confided the secret with which he had been entrusted by his master. When Abdul Wahab died, this friend, following his example, continued to pursue the path which he had directed him to tread, and announced to every receptive soul the tidings of God's fast approaching revelation.
Superb. Thank you so much, Layla. We'll pause there just to break down what's happening, because these names again come in and it can get a little bit confusing. So now we're hearing, so firstly, we know that from Shiraz, Sheikh Ahmed decides to go to a place called Yazd. Yazd, by the way, if anyone's thinking and would like to know, make very good slippers. Highly recommend. If you're going to buy any flip-flops, Yazd is the place to go to. Right? So anyway, so he goes to Yazd. I don't think it was for the flip-flop, the slipper trade. He goes to Yazd, and he's there, and he's writing a lot of his epistles and the rest of it. He's on his way, just so we look at the map. So from Shiraz to Yazd, he's on his way up here to Mashhad. Okay, Mashhad, by the way, this houses the shrine of Imam Reza. Imam Reza is the 8th Imam of Shia Islam. And here we have actually, I think, the second largest mosque by capacity in the world. It's a ginormous mosque. So he's going there to pray. That's his ultimate goal. But while he's here in Yazd, he has this interaction with the king, Fath Ali Shah, who was a very slender man. Fath Ali Shah, basically, he'd had some questions about Islam, and he'd written to Sheikh Ahmed, and had basically said to Sheikh Ahmed, he came up with all these really difficult questions, and of course Sheikh Ahmed responds in the Rasaleh Sultaniyeh, and the king is blown away. He's like, what? How, oh my God, how did you do this? And it's like, you know what? You need to come over for tea. Seriously, you need to come around for a cup of tea. I don't know if he spoke like that. And Sheikh Ahmed's like, well, thank you so much. I'd love to come around for a cuppa, but I actually have to go on pilgrimage. I'm going to the shrine of Imam Reza, the 8th Imam of Shia Islam, as you know, dear king, obviously, and as the second largest mosque by capacity, as you also know. And he says, so I will come a bit later. And the king's like, but you must come for tea. He's like, look, we'll do the tea thing later. Then we shift to the story. And generally, by the way, whenever we have a DH in our script, if we have a DH like here, it's a Z sound. Dahabi becomes Zahabi. But anyway, so then he basically, we then hear this story about this guy named Abdul Wahab. And there's actually a couple of Abdul Wahabs in the Dawnbreaker. I think there's about 4 of them. Popular name-ish. So this Abdul Wahab is like me. He's not an academic genius. He's like a DJ of his day, basically. So he can play music, but that's about it. So we've got Abdul Wahab, and then we've also got his friend, Mr. Khalik as well. Who where's his name to highlight for you? Yeah, Abdul Khalik Yazdi. Abdul Khalik was like my brother. Was a doctor. He was like the smart one or whatever. So there's Abdul Khalik, and then there's Abdul Wahab. And so basically they both go to see Sheikh Ahmed. And of course Abdul Khalik says to Abdul Wahab, listen, step out the way. Like, I'm the one with the degree and the rest of it. Let me talk to Sheikh Ahmed. And he was a slightly arrogant man. Sheikh Ahmed didn't really vibe with this guy. And he basically came up with reasons, and he's like, look, could you please leave me alone, as I want to talk to Abdul Wahab. Abdul Wahab, this simpler guy, this simpler sort of character. And lo and behold, he spoke to Abdul Wahab. Abdul Wahab became a follower of Sheikh Ahmed, which is called a Sheikhi. And then this is when Abdul Wahab becomes a Sheikhi. And then it talks about how people thought he'd become a Sufi, which is Sufi is a type of Shia Muslim, but very mystical. And you may know of these whirling dervishes where they spin round, or they have these begging bowls and the rest of it. They thought he'd become one of them, and some of them had a bit of beef with Abdul Wahab. They're like, we don't get it, what you're trying to do. And he didn't really care about that. Obviously, he had been told something by Sheikh Ahmed. There was something that Abdul Wahab was told by Sheikh Ahmed that made him really sort of like excited and actually sort of almost give up his life as it was. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 7 o'clock. We will continue in our next session and find out what that thing was. We are maybe halfway through the first chapter. This book is so rich with detail. The excitement steps up and steps up. Right now, we're just like laying the foundation, laying the background. I'm aware that you guys have things to do, you have places to be. So as much as I'd like to carry on for 6 hours just talking at you, it's probably best if I don't.